Welcome on this beautiful North Idaho spring day where the water's flowing. You can hear it if you just listen enough. We have the animals are going, and the snow is starting to melt. You can see there we start getting these melting areas, and then that'll spread out throughout our homestead. And by the way, we watch that very closely because those are good indications of your property. They give you ideas about your sunnier areas, drier areas, moister, shadier, etc. This video today is going to be about the top 5 homestead mistakes that we see or we have experienced ourselves to one degree or another. And the first one is this is really important, and that is not understanding why you're doing what you're doing, or not having a good enough purpose, not a strong enough why. And here's something I see all the time. People absolutely love the idea of homesteading. They love it. They love the idea of it. Back to nature, simpler life, but underestimate all the things that go along with it. And loving the idea of something is not a strong enough why for actually doing that thing. Okay, so loving the idea of something and doing something are two totally different things. And a lot of people get caught up in that. They love the idea of it and they come out and they start doing it and they do it for a couple of years and then they're gone. And I've seen this happen literally dozens and dozens of times, and I'm sure you have as well. So understanding why you're getting into something and doing it is what's going to sustain you during times that are extremely challenging. They're hard. Your snow plow truck is breaking down. You're having problems. The power's going out left and right. You're struggling in various areas. Not having a strong enough why will ensure that you will not continue to do this thing for very long. Okay, and so that's part of what we see on a regular basis as the number one mistake. And you can develop a why. It doesn't have to be like, well, I really want to do this thing, but really mapping it out and looking through those reasons why you're doing it, understanding them, and then cementing them in yourself and remembering them continuously, going over them will help get you through challenging and tough times. The second biggest mistake that homesteaders make is not purchasing the proper property in the first place. Now, this is driven by a lot of factors, financial, which we're going to get to next, and many other factors, but not understanding that, not doing their due diligence and understanding, taking their whys and then applying that to finding the proper property. Okay, we see this happen a lot. People will come out onto property. They have they're going to build, they're going to start a YouTube channel and they're going to make their living off of that, and they're going to have an online business. Yet the property they have has no cell service and no internet access, or very poor internet access. That's an example. That's a small example because you can overcome that, but I actually see that one a lot. And other things, not buying a property that has terrible winter access, buying a property that doesn't have sufficient water to do what they want to do. Lots of different things like that. That is probably one of the biggest reasons that we see people fail or quit after a year or 2 years or 3 years maybe. When you're looking at systems, okay, this is a systems engineers will appreciate this. When you're looking at different systems, if you're looking how to fix systems or improve systems or do continuous improvement, making tweaks here or there to fix and make systems more effective and more efficient, the number one best way to have a system work properly is to design it that way in the first place. Okay, so if you have a system that's really bad and you're trying to figure out ways to fix it, sometimes redesigning that whole system is the best option going forward. And sometimes buying a property that's completely insufficient for what you want to do is, sometimes it's out of people's reach, but getting the right property in the first place would be the best approach in that case. So if you're looking for land, make sure that these things are all tied together. What are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do it? And you need to have the proper criteria and get that property correct the first time. That doesn't mean that you should get analysis paralysis, and so you don't do anything because you can't find something that's perfect. but it has to have all the right basic elements, design elements in the first place. The third biggest mistake that we see is underestimating the financial costs. This is a big one. This we see almost across the board. No question about it. Yeah, we've made this mistake to a certain degree, but we see this pretty extensively with most homesteaders. And this manifests in a few different ways. One way is initial startup costs. They're totally underestimated. People think, oh, we're going to move out to land, we're going to be self-sufficient, we're going to produce a lot of our own stuff, therefore we don't need a lot of money. And that's just not the case. A lot of the establishment phases and startup costs are just underestimated, okay? Another way that this manifests itself is that people will buy property, again, kind of goes back to that last one, and they will take a trailer out onto a property and say, okay, well, we're going to live in our trailer and then we're going to build our home, for example. That's just one example. Well, they come out with a quote-unquote pile of cash, and they buy a trailer, they move out onto a piece of property, and they say, okay, we're going to build our home, and it never happens, or it happens partially, and they end up with a partially built home, and they're out of money because they've underestimated the cost, the financial cost. The other way that this manifests itself is in just day-to-day operations of running a homestead. People think, again, I don't need a lot of money. I'll basically provide for all of my own needs off the land. And that takes an incredible skill and a long time to establish, to be perfectly honest. So most of us require inputs. Now we try and reduce inputs over time, but initially for the first several years, it's going to require inputs. And probably always will, to at least some degree. And so that those regular operational costs are often misunderstood and underestimated. So the day-to-day costs of taking care of animals, for example, fencing, all these initial costs, structures. Even if you're using a lot of repurposed material, you're getting free stuff here or there. In the end, yes, that will save you some money over time, and it can save significant money. But it still costs money, and people find that out kind of the hard way because they think, oh, I'm gonna get free pallets everywhere and build all my fences out of pallets, and that doesn't really work out most of the time. It can in bits and pieces here and there, and you can save significant amounts of money. You don't have to spend $30,000 on fencing. But from what we have seen, the underestimation of financial costs is a huge, huge mistake that homesteaders make all the time. It's probably one of the number one reasons why homesteaders come and go, right? Besides not having the right why or buying the wrong property, this is a really big one. Number 4, underestimating the physical cost, the physical capability and requirement to run a homestead. Now there are many different levels to this. You can have a very low maintenance homestead that doesn't require a lot of physical capability, or you can have a very intensive homestead, with market gardening as a big part of it, that requires a lot of physical activity. Okay, so for our own homestead has changed over time, and we've moved to more and more of a low maintenance homestead. However, there's still a lot of physical activity even in a low maintenance homestead. For example, in the wintertime, we've got our homestead pared down to requiring 15 minutes worth of work a day in the wintertime, and probably an hour's worth of work during the growing season. With projects mixed in there where there's going to be spurts of large amounts of work. Okay, so in certain projects that might be 8 or 10 hours a day working on a particular project, but as far as operational maintenance, day-to-day stuff, we don't work for more than an hour a day, and I mean like between all of us. Okay, so we're a low maintenance homestead, heavy perennials. We have some basic animal systems, but not a lot of intensive stuff. And we do annual gardening as well, but again, not massive amounts where we're having to spend 2-3 hours a day in the garden. Okay, it's minimal time in the garden on a daily basis though. Okay, so there is a lot of physical activity. And I would also put learning skills in this category. You know, learning the skills required. So we underestimate what it takes to learn a skill. We say, oh yeah, well, I'll learn to process all of my own animals. Well, that takes a significant amount of work to be able to do that and do it well. So that type of thing is often misunderstood or underestimated. And then again, the daily work. It seems like there's two different groups or categories of people that want to come out to the land and homestead. Now, of course, the whole range of people are represented, but we see this a lot, at least in our area. They're either young, very young, young couples, young families that want to get out there, early 20s. And of course, they're physically capable and do that, but they often have the previous mistakes that we've talked about are in play. And then the other group is the retired somethings. This is the 50 somethings, the 60 somethings. We see this quite a lot as well, or now they can actually afford to move out to the land and slow down a little bit on their day-to-day work outside of the home, or they're retired from something else and now they want to go and work a piece of land. And so that there's significant capability there, although limited, physically, depending on their individual health and fitness. Okay, so underestimating the physical costs of homesteading is the number 4. The 5th homestead mistake that we see is not planning. And again, this is a really big one. And this is an area where I work with clients with planning, project management, strategic planning, all the way down to detailed planning. Like I said, project management, land use planning, etc. So what I see oftentimes, I like to think of it and tell it like this. Imagine your homestead is a black box. Everything that's within your homestead, everything that occurs within your homestead is inside of that black box. Okay, all your homestead operations, your raising of livestock, your plantings, your harvesting, all of that, processing firewood, everything. The average homesteader, the only thing they know is the inputs, the places where things come into the black box, and the outputs, the things that come out of the black box. They have no idea what's going on inside of that black box. And I mean that not in the sense that, yeah, obviously they know they're raising chickens, but they don't know what the cost is to raising those chickens. They don't know the actual, okay, what's the feed to meat ratio, or eggs, how many eggs are those chickens producing per year on average they don't understand these things oftentimes, and they just operate, and that's fine, because they're so busy operating that they don't plan and they don't understand what's happening in the black box. A good rule of thumb is that every minute of planning saves you 10 minutes in execution. Now, of course, that's not literal. For you, it might be you save 5 minutes in execution, or someone else might save 15, or whatever. That's not the point. The point is that planning is very beneficial and will save you some time in execution. I have yet to ever meet anyone who said, oh yeah, we totally wasted all of our time planning for whatever. Okay, that just doesn't happen. I've never heard that, ever. In any context, homesteading or not homesteading, planning is essential and it will help you. And it is a huge mistake that I see, but it's a very consistent mistake that I see among homesteaders specifically. And one bonus mistake, if you want to call it a bonus, one that we own for sure, one thing that I've gone, I wish I would have changed that. I would have done that a little bit differently. And that is this. One, I am a permaculture designer. That's how our methodology, that's how we, run our homestead. And we've done, we've planted hundreds and hundreds of trees and shrubs and herbaceous herbs and flowers, et cetera, et cetera. And the one thing that I would do differently is I would nurse along some of those early plantings more. I would have paid more attention to them initially. Even though I'm a hardcore permaculturist for sure, I would have paid more attention to them during the establishment phase. Okay, because I lost a lot of trees and shrubs by basically taking a hands-off approach and saying, well, if it survives, it survives. It was meant to, or if it doesn't survive, then it didn't want to grow there. I would have changed that. I would have paid closer attention, nursed them along more, and I probably would have more trees and shrubs producing now than I do. I have plenty producing, but I would have liked to have been a little further along, and I would be further along if I had done that. Okay, so in conclusion, all of these mistakes that I have covered are things that are consistent with homesteaders. Not everyone, of course, but I see a lot of this over and over and over. And so that's why I consider these the top 5 plus 1 bonus of mistakes that homesteaders make. So hopefully you will learn from this, not make some of the same mistakes, or be able to recognize like, yeah, I need to do more planning because I have no idea what's going on in the black box, for example. So I hope you enjoyed this video and let us know. Subscribe to this channel. Leave us a comment. Tell us what your biggest takeaway from this is. Or if you have an anecdotal, a mistake that you would like to add, that would be very helpful too. So let us know how